What is going on, IF Warriors? It's your boy Edward V, and today we're gonna talk about my beef with alternate day fasting studies. This might be a rant. Stay tuned. Now, every time I'm looking for studies, I read studies every day. I use about 4 hours a day to read studies in its entirety, not just intermittent fasting, mostly intermittent fasting studies, but I do read other studies as well to see how I could connect certain things that I do fitness-wise to the success that I get with intermittent fasting and vice versa. But there's always this one intermittent fasting study protocol that always drives me nuts, and that's alternate day fasting. And it's because not only is that one of the most misleading titles ever for a study, it gives arsenal to a lot of people who don't really want intermittent fasting to succeed or don't care for intermittent fasting to succeed because they have established themselves already in the fitness industry, for example, in which they've pushed for years to eat 6 meals a day, and that's how they got their results. So they want to stay consistent with their audience and everyone who's watching them. And now that intermittent fasting is surging, you'll see a lot of people in fitness industry who do like competitive bodybuilding and stuff like that will always say, oh, intermittent fasting doesn't work. And here's a study about fasting, and here's another study about fasting, and here's another study about fasting. I implore every single one of you guys that see a video like that in which they're saying, here's a study and here's a study, the links will be in the description down below. I implore every single one of you to go into that description, click pause on that person's video, whoever that person is. Go into the description, click the video, and look to see if the protocol was alternate day fasting. Because I can tell you that 9 times out of 10 in a failed fasting study, the protocol was always alternate day fasting. Now, if it was truly alternate day fasting, well, then we will be having a different conversation. But that is never the case. It is always low calorie consumption days versus high calorie consumption days. And by high calorie, I'm talking about 125% of what they're supposed to take in. And by low calorie, I mean about 25% of what they're supposed to take in, or 50%. It ends up being for men like 500 calories on those days that they're not supposed to eat, the fasting days. And for women, it ends up being something like 700 calories. And then the next day they go above everything. They go up to the 100% of what they're supposed to take, and then they go 25% even more. And this is against someone who's doing just a streamlined caloric restriction. So usually it's 3 groups. There's a control group where they don't do anything at all. It's the caloric restriction group, which is always at 75% of their daily intake for them to lose weight. And then there is the alternate day fasting group, which is 25% on fasting days, 125% on feeding days. They have no restriction on how they can eat the 500 calories. They can eat it throughout the day. They can split it up. They can do whatever they want on the fasting day with their 500 calories, and for women with their 700 calories. They can do whatever they want, which begs the question, are they truly fasting? Now, let me give you a perfect example. This study right here that was released in July 2017, many articles have been made about this study, and a lot of times the person writing the article loves to point out the fact that fasting did not have any significant value. Now, granted, the weight reduction percentage was 6% for the alternate day fasting group and 5.3% for the caloric restriction group. That number is not different enough to be significant to show a significant advantage for one protocol over the other. It was a small study. It was about a year, and it was only 100 people. Now, it's very easy for a headline in an article to say, study proves there's no significant value to fasting. See, now you're taking one study off of one protocol and you're grouping every fasting protocol in there with your headline. Your headline, it's misleading because it's letting people who are not going to click into your study as I do, who are not going to read the whole thing as I do and see all the limitations in the study and see what the exact protocol is or what was the faults that happened in the study. They're not going to look at those things because studies have faults. The actual participants have faults. For example, this study right here that's pushed a lot by a lot of people saying that intermittent fasting doesn't have any significant value shows that the people who did alternate day fasting ate more than they were prescribed to eat on their fasting days. So they didn't even stick to the 500 calorie limit. They went above the 500 calorie limit, and then they ate less than they were prescribed to eat on the feeding days, which was like, instead of 125%, it was the 100% of what they were supposed to take. So they are essentially eating every single day. That's what they're doing. You're not seeing any significant value because they're basically doing around the same thing that the caloric restriction group is doing. They're just eating every day, and with one day being slightly less in calories than the other. Now you're probably thinking, Edward, why does that bother you? Who cares? Like, we know that intermittent fasting works when they do, for example, a 48-hour fast where you can't eat anything, or when they use Ramadan subjects because they actually can't eat. They can't cheat the system. They're more likely going to actually fast over someone who never did fasting before, and you're just throwing them into some type of a fasting regimen. And those studies exist, and those studies show the benefits, and those studies rarely ever fail. It's the platform to mislead the audience that just bothers me so much. To have to break that down every single time is very, very infuriating sometimes. So many people will link studies to me about this, and every time I click and I see alternate day fasting, I roll my eyes before I start reading all of the study limitations and all of the faults that come with that article. I implore people that when you see an article that talks about fasting, even if it's positive or negative to fasting, I want you to click the actual study. If you truly want to know about it, then click the study, read the full study. When I see an article that says intermittent fasting doesn't work and this is the proof, or anything to that effect, it's just annoying that when I see the study, I see that they didn't actually do any type of fasting at all. Actually fasting, truly fasting, is what gives you all of those body fat, weight loss benefits. It's going to burn your body fat when your insulin is at baseline, but if you're consistently eating, your insulin is not going to be at baseline. The adipose browning, that where it turns the white fat into the beige brown fat, which the brown fat is the one that's adept to burning for energy. The white fat is the one that's adept for just storing body fat. When you're not actually fasting, those things are not actually happening. So where would the benefit be if the person is simply eating every single day, but you're chalking it up as a fasting protocol? It's not. Alternate day fasting creates a misleading perception of intermittent fasting. And if any single person tells you that intermittent fasting doesn't work and tells you that anything that they're talking about is in the description down below, please, please, please click that hyperlink. Go there and just take you don't have to read the whole thing, but just at least see if it's an alternate day fasting study, which unfortunately is the case most of the time. For some weird reason, all these scientists and all these medical researchers want to simply do alternate day fasting studies, and they don't want to do other studies. I don't know if it's because they're not getting the clearance to put someone into a fasting protocol, a true one where they don't eat, where they consume no calories during the fasting time frame and then they consume calories. I don't know if that's the reason. Unfortunately, even people who push for intermittent fasting in the YouTube community, big people and small people alike, create strategies around intermittent fasting of trying to avoid certain things in studies that were done with alternate day fasting. And the problem is that the study is extremely flawed, but yet they use that. And then they also go against their own ethos of intermittent fasting by saying, oh, well, you can't do this with intermittent fasting, or you can't do intermittent fasting every day because this study, and that would be an alternate day fasting study that shows all these problems. And then you look into it and the people are eating more than they were supposed to on their fasting days, eating less than they're supposed to on their feeding days, which essentially means that they're just eating every single day. So yes, I'm gonna end this video right here. I just wanted to get that off of my chest because a lot of people either send me these links saying, oh, you're wrong because of this, or a lot of articles just come out and say, oh, this doesn't work. Fasting as a whole does not work because these alternate day fasting studies over here conveniently tell me that. However, all these other studies here, these 48-hour studies, these Ramadan studies, all of these studies that have more validity to it, because if you get someone who does Ramadan, they do it no matter what. They do it if it's a clinical trial, if it's not a clinical trial, for religious purposes. So they will still do it. You'll still get the data from them, but you can rest assured that they are more than likely going to actually legitimately fast and then feed. And they're not gonna throw off the numbers by eating when they're supposed to be fasting. Anyways, that's my rant, I guess, about alternate day fasting. I just had to take that off of my chest and put it in a video. And I hope this helps you understand or be more critical of anyone who are posting articles, be it good or bad. Always click that link in the description so that you can go to the actual study and bare minimum read, the abstract, read the results, the conclusions, things like that. If you're not going to read the whole thing, just so that you can get an idea of the study that this person is referring to. Because the headlines or the conclusions of studies people will grab and use for their videos, for their articles, but they won't actually dive into what the faults and limitations of that study was. And that is very important when you want to present an argument. Thank you for watching, guys, and I want to thank my patrons for my Patreon, and I'm going to put their names right up here.